Minnesota is often known as the land of lakes, snow, and quiet small towns. But behind that peaceful image, there is another side that feels much stranger. In this state, you can find a town famous only because of its absurd name, a town with a giant turkey statue in the middle of the road, and remote places that feel like the snowy edge of the world. There is a town whose main identity is a giant ball of twine, and another small town with mental hospital legends, crime rumors, and an atmosphere that feels slightly off once the sun starts to set. And the farther you go into rural Minnesota, the more it feels like you are entering another version of America that most people rarely see. These are the 15 weirdest towns in Minnesota. It is hard to talk about this small town without addressing its name first. Across America, Climax may be one of the town names that goes viral the most because it sounds absurd, ambiguous, and makes people think it is just an internet joke. But Climax is a real town in northwestern Minnesota, near the North Dakota border, and that is where the weirdness begins. Behind a name that sounds loud and attention-grabbing, Climax is actually just a super quiet farming town with fewer than 300 people. Its roads are silent, surrounded by endless flat fields, and when winter arrives, the atmosphere can feel completely empty. What makes it even weirder is that the town has long been featured on lists of weird town names in America, and it often appears on TV shows and internet articles simply because of its name. So even though it is small and remote, Climax has a national reputation far bigger than the town itself. If there is a small town in Minnesota that feels like roadside America from a strange dream, Blue Earth might be one of them. This town is famous for its giant Jolly Green Giant statue, standing about 56 feet tall on the road. From a distance, the huge green figure looks so random that it almost feels like a Photoshop edit in the middle of the Midwest fields. Blue Earth itself is really just a small farming town of around 3,200 people in southern Minnesota. But the presence of that giant vegetable mascot makes the whole town feel surreal. Many people stop not because of the town itself, but just to take photos with the statue. And amusingly, locals have fully made that icon part of the town's main identity. The name Blue Earth also adds to its unique aura. It sounds almost like the name of a fantasy world or a sci-fi planet, not a small town in the Midwest. In many small American towns, people are usually proud of their history or natural scenery. But in Darwin, the main pride is a giant ball of twine. And not just a big one, the town is famous for the world's largest ball of twine made by one person. A massive twine ball created over decades by a local resident named Francis A. Johnson. This absurd attraction sits in the middle of a small town with only a few hundred people. The atmosphere is very quiet, filled with small houses and empty Midwest roads. And then suddenly, there is a giant ball of twine that looks like some random object from an American comedy movie. The idea that a small town can become widely known just because of a giant ball of string feels like classic roadside America absurdity. And strangely enough, that is exactly what makes Darwin memorable. At first glance, Moose Lake looks like an ordinary small town in northern Minnesota. Dense forest, cold air, and quiet roads make the place feel peaceful. But the deeper you look into its history, the more the atmosphere starts to feel slightly unsettling. The town was once known for Moose Lake State Hospital, a state mental health facility that became a major part of the town's identity. For years, the place inspired local rumors, mysterious stories, and tales that made Moose Lake feel connected to that creepy small-town Midwest aura. On top of that, Moose Lake also has a history of disaster, when a devastating tornado in 1918 destroyed part of the town and killed hundreds of people across the surrounding area. Vining is the kind of small town that feels normal, until you start looking at the roadside. With a population that does not even reach a few hundred people, the town first appears like a typical tiny rural community in western Minnesota. Quiet, flat, and surrounded by fields and small lakes. Then suddenly, a row of extremely strange scrap metal sculptures appears. Vining is famous for roadside art by local artist Ken Nyberg, who created absurd metal sculptures from discarded materials. There are alien-like characters, strange animals, and human figures deliberately shaped in bizarre ways. Some look funny, while others feel slightly creepy when the road is empty. Vining truly has the aura of small-town America, too random to explain. Cold Spring may look like a calm and tidy Midwestern small town, but behind its peaceful atmosphere, it was once the center of one of the most famous and mysterious criminal cases in modern Minnesota. The name Cold Spring became widely known after the murder of Tom Decker in 2012, a case that still raises theories, rumors, and debate among locals. Many people feel that some details were never fully answered, giving the town a strange aura that still lingers years later. What makes Cold Spring weird is the contrast. The town is actually beautiful and fairly prosperous compared with many other Midwestern small towns. With a population of around 4,000 and a community that looks completely normal. But because everything seems almost too quiet, that major crime story feels even more disturbing. Hibbing feels different, even compared with other small towns in northern Minnesota. The strangest thing about Hibbing is the fact that part of the town was literally moved. In the early 1900s, iron ore mining grew so large that the mine began threatening the old downtown area. The solution? Several buildings and streets were moved to a new location so the mine could keep expanding. The idea of a town having to shift places for a mine sounds like something from a dystopian movie. Hibbing is also known as Bob Dylan's hometown, but even that fact feels in contrast with the town's cold and hard atmosphere. When winter arrives, the mix of heavy snow, a massive open pit mine, and gray skies makes Hibbing feel extremely quiet and heavy. In Minnesota, few towns have a vibe as strange and industrial as Hibbing. Ely feels like the last town before the world fully turns into wilderness. Located far in northern Minnesota, near the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness, this small town has a very strong feeling of isolation, especially when the long winter begins. With a population of only a few thousand people, Ely is surrounded by lakes, dense forest, and wild nature as far as the eye can see. Many people come here for survival camping, canoeing, or simply to feel what it is like to be very far from modern life. And that is what makes Ely feel weird. This place still carries the atmosphere of the old American frontier, something that has almost disappeared in many other places. Ely is not weird because it is absurd or funny like Climax or Darwin, but because it feels so remote and so close to the edge of the world compared with modern American life today. Wabasha is one of the oldest towns in Minnesota and perhaps one of the places that feels most like a town from the past. Standing along the Mississippi River, this small town is filled with old buildings, river fog, and a classic Midwest atmosphere that makes it feel slightly mysterious, especially on cold mornings or when autumn arrives. The name Wabasha itself comes from Dakota Chief Wabasha III, giving the town a long history that is much older than many other small towns in Minnesota. Wabasha is also known through the movie Grumpy Old Men, which showed its unique and eccentric small-town side. But behind its warm appearance, there is a quiet mood typical of old Mississippi River towns. Old streets, foggy winters, and historic buildings that feel like they are holding many stories. Even the name sounds like a place at the edge of the map. Northome feels more like a location from a survival novel than a real town. And, strangely, the town's atmosphere actually fits that impression. Located far in northern Minnesota, Northome is a tiny town surrounded by forest, swamps, and long empty roads, with a very small population. What makes Northome feel weird is not strange attractions or absurd festivals, but its atmosphere. The town has a strong, lost-in-time vibe, as if the modern world only passes somewhere in the distance without ever really touching this place. A small gas station, old houses, and empty roads in the middle of the forest give Northome a quiet aura that is hard to explain. Gray Eagle sounds like the name of a town from an old Western movie, and when you see it in person, the atmosphere really does feel like a place left behind in the past. This small town sits in rural central Minnesota, surrounded by fields, small forests, and quiet roads that sometimes feel like they lead nowhere. With only a few hundred residents, Gray Eagle has a very strong classic rural atmosphere. Its old buildings, small roadside bars, and slow pace of life make the town feel far from the modern world. The name Gray Eagle itself adds to the aura. It sounds mysterious, almost like the name of a character from an American frontier legend. And compared with other weird towns that are absurd or funny, Gray Eagle's strangeness comes more from its silence and remoteness. Nothing is more confusing than finding a super quiet small town in rural Minnesota named New York Mills. The name sounds like part of New York City, but in reality, this is just a small town with around 1,000 people, surrounded by Midwest fields and lakes. That contrast is exactly what makes New York Mills feel weird. You imagine tall buildings and busy streets, but instead you get calm little roads, simple local shops, and a rural atmosphere far from anything New York. Its big name creates high expectations. Then the reality feels like a town at the edge of the Midwest world. And maybe that is exactly why New York Mills is memorable. Welcome may have one of the strangest and most ironic town names in Minnesota, because when people see the welcome sign for the first time, they usually get confused. Is that the town's name, or just a regular greeting sign? This small town in southern Minnesota is actually very quiet and simple, with only a few hundred residents. Its main street is short, surrounded by wide farmland, and the atmosphere is completely rural Midwest. But because its name is so common, Welcome feels like a place that is almost not real. And like many other weird towns in Minnesota, Welcome is not crowded or loud. Its weirdness comes from the mix of an absurd name, a super quiet atmosphere, and the fact that this ordinary small town became known because of one simple word. Spring Grove feels like a small piece of Scandinavia lost in rural America. This small town in southeastern Minnesota is known for its strong Norwegian heritage, from cultural festivals and traditional food to its architecture and community identity. Walking through Spring Grove can feel strange because the atmosphere is different from many other Midwestern towns. There is a Northern European feeling that still feels alive, as if the town intentionally preserved its old identity in the middle of modern America. Even some of its local traditions are still strongly rooted in 19th century Norwegian culture. What makes Spring Grove feel weird is not creepiness or absurdity, but cultural contrast. In the middle of Minnesota's fields and quiet roads, a small town suddenly appears with a very strong Scandinavian vibe. Frazee is a perfect example of how a small Midwestern town can feel strange because of one very random idea. This town is famous for a giant turkey statue named Big Tom Turkey, standing boldly in the middle of town. And yes, the whole town really has made that giant turkey its main icon. With only around 1,000 residents, Frazee is actually a quiet small town in Minnesota's Lake region. But the presence of Big Tom gives it an absurd and memorable roadside America vibe. It is hard to pass through this town without thinking, why is there a giant turkey here? But unlike Ely or Northome, which feel weird because of their wilderness, Frazee feels more like an eccentric small town that proudly accepts its weirdness. And that is exactly why Frazee is one of Minnesota's most iconic weird towns.